When I was 8 months pregnant, my father-in-law stood up during Sunday dinner outside Cedar Falls and announced, "I'll be in the delivery room when the baby comes." He said it like he was confirming a reservation, not asking permission. Graham had always acted as if every major family decision belonged to him. The second Ethan and I announced the pregnancy, he started calling the baby the next Carter man, my legacy, and the one who'll carry our name. At first, I laughed it off. By the third trimester, it stopped being funny. That night, with 12 relatives around the table, I told him clearly that the only person I wanted with me during labor was my husband, Ethan. Graham gave me the dismissive smile he used whenever someone said something he had already decided to ignore. "You won't even notice who's there once things start," he said. I told him that was not the point. It was my medical procedure, my body, and my decision. Instead of backing down, he looked at Ethan and said, "In this family, the men stand together when the next generation arrives." A few people nodded. Ethan's aunt even called it beautiful. I repeated that Graham would not be in the room. For the next 2 weeks, Graham brought it up constantly. He told cousins, neighbors, and people from his bowling league that he was going to welcome his grandson into the world personally. People I barely knew began congratulating him. Then he crossed a line I could not ignore. One afternoon, the receptionist from my obstetrician's office called me. A man claiming to be helping Ethan with our hospital paperwork had phoned asking about visitor rules for labor and delivery. He wanted to know whether a grandfather could be added at check-in and whether the mother could change the visitor list after labor had started. The receptionist thought the questions were strange and called me first. It was Graham. When Ethan confronted him, Graham did not deny it. He said he was just getting information. Then he suggested Ethan could simply bring him into the room once I was too far into labor to argue. That was when Ethan finally told him to stop. Graham replied, "I never thought my own son would let his wife shut me out of my grandson's birth." A few days later, he arrived at our house carrying a tiny varsity jacket. Across the back, in large stitched letters, was the name Graham 2. Our son was not going to be named Graham. We had already chosen Caleb, and Graham knew it. Still, he held the jacket up proudly and said, "He can wear it when I'm the first one to hold him." I remember looking at Ethan and realizing this was no longer an annoying disagreement. Graham had built an entire version of my child's birth in his head, and in that version, my consent did not matter.
He was standing at the nurse's station with a paper coffee cup in one hand, arguing with the woman behind the desk. "I'm the grandfather," he kept saying. "My son is back there. I have every right to be with my family." I froze in the hallway. Ethan stepped in front of me and asked him how he even knew we were there. Graham smiled like the question did not matter. Later, we found out Ethan's cousin Marcus had texted him after hearing from my mother that I had gone into labor. The nurse checked my chart and told Graham that only one support person had been approved, Ethan. Graham immediately started arguing. He said the hospital was being unreasonable. He said families had traditions. He said I had clearly made the decision while emotional and that Ethan should be allowed to override it. The nurse's expression changed instantly. She looked directly at me and asked, "Do you want this man in your room?" No. That was all she needed. She told Graham he could wait downstairs. He did not. About 20 minutes later, while I was already having contractions strong enough that I could barely speak through them, someone tried the handle of my room. A nurse opened the door from inside. Graham was standing there. He said he only wanted to check on Ethan. The nurse told him to leave. Instead, he tried to look around her into the room. I heard him say, "This is ridiculous. That is my grandson being born in there." My heart started racing so hard that the monitor alarmed. Ethan went into the hallway and told his father to go home. Graham accused him of choosing me over his family. Then Graham called his sister, Patricia, who arrived less than an hour later and stood outside the maternity unit texting Ethan that his father was devastated. At one point she wrote, "He has waited his entire life for this. You are breaking his heart." I was in labor, shaking from contractions, and somehow the conversation was still about Graham's feelings. Finally, the charge nurse came down the hallway and told both of them they had to leave the floor. Graham argued with her too. He said he knew hospital administrators. He threatened to file a complaint. He insisted grandparents had legal rights. The charge nurse calmly told him that none of those rights included entering a patient's room without permission. Then she called security. 2 security officers escorted Graham to the main lobby while he continued talking loudly about the Carter family name. That was the last I saw of him that day. 6 hours later, Caleb was born. The first person to hold him was me. The second was Ethan. My mother, Diane, came in later and held him while I finally ate something. Graham stayed downstairs the entire time. No one went to get him. 2 days later, we brought Caleb home. Before I had even taken my shoes off, Ethan's phone started vibrating on the kitchen counter. 14 missed calls, all from Graham. Then came the family group chat. Messages from people who had not been at the hospital started calling us cruel, disrespectful, selfish. According to Graham's version of the story, he had quietly waited outside my room and had been thrown out without reason. There was just one problem with that version. The hospital had documented everything. The charge nurse had written down the argument at the desk, Graham trying my door, his refusal to leave, and the exact time security escorted him downstairs. I requested copies before we left the hospital. I did not know yet that I would need them. For the next 3 days, Graham never contacted me directly. He called Ethan instead. Sometimes he sounded angry. I hope you're proud of yourself. Sometimes wounded. I just wanted to see my grandson come into the world. And sometimes he blamed me completely. She is separating you from your own family. Every conversation ended the same way. Ethan, exhausted, quiet, in questioning whether we had handled things correctly. The family group chat made it worse. Every few hours, another aunt, cousin, or family friend sent a message about how hurt Graham was. Patricia wrote that her brother had cried the entire drive home from the hospital. Nobody asked how I was doing. Nobody mentioned that I had given birth 2 days earlier. On the third night, after Caleb finally fell asleep, Ethan sat beside me on the couch and said, "Maybe we should let Dad come over once." I stared at him. "One supervised visit," he said quickly, "just an hour. Maybe if he sees Caleb, everything calms down." Every instinct in me said no. Graham had not apologized. He had not admitted doing anything wrong. But I could see what the pressure was doing to Ethan, so I agreed. 1 visit. Our house, our rules. I wrote them down. Graham had to ask before holding Caleb. He could not take him into another room. He could not call him Graham, Jr., Little G, or anything except Caleb. No photographs without asking, no discussing the delivery room. The visit would last 1 hour. If he raised his voice or ignored a boundary, it ended immediately. I taped the paper beside the front door. My mother read it and said, "Do you really think a list is going to stop him?" "No," I said. "It's so nobody can claim he didn't know." The visit was scheduled for noon. Graham knocked at 11:37, 23 minutes early. Ethan opened a door. Graham walked straight past him and looked toward the bassinet. He did not say hello to me. I stepped between him and Caleb. "We start at noon." He looked at the clock, sighed dramatically, and sat down. For the first 20 minutes, he was almost perfect. He asked before touching Caleb. He washed his hands. He sat exactly where I told him to sit. When I finally placed Caleb in his arms, Graham supported his head carefully and spoke so softly I barely recognized his voice. For one stupid moment, I wondered whether I had misjudged him. Then he smiled down at Caleb. "You've got the Carter nose," he whispered. "Definitely one of us." I let that go. A minute later, he said, "You know what Grandpa is going to call you?" I looked up. Graham continued before I could answer. "Little G, because Graham should have been your name." I stood immediately. "His name is Caleb." Graham kept looking at the baby. "I know what you named him." "What we named him," Ethan corrected. Graham ignored him. Then he reached into the gift bag beside his chair. He pulled out a cream-colored baby blanket with dark blue stitching across one corner. "Graham, Carter, 2. My stomach dropped. He spread it over Caleb like he had been waiting for this exact moment. I walked across the room and removed it. "That is not his name." Graham finally looked at me. "It's a blanket." "No, it's a message." He laughed under his breath and turned to Ethan. "Are you seriously going to let her behave like this in front of your father?" Ethan stood up. "It's our house, Dad, and she's right." Something in Graham's expression changed. The gentle grandfather disappeared. He stood while still holding Caleb. "You two can play these games all you want," he said quietly, "but I am his grandfather. You cannot erase me. Grandparents have rights." I stepped toward him. "Give me my son." Graham did not move. For several seconds, he just stood there, holding Caleb and staring directly at me. Then very slowly, he handed him back. I pulled Caleb against my chest. Ethan pointed toward the door. "Dad, leave." Graham picked up the embroidered blanket, folded it neatly, then placed it on our coffee table. "It stays," he said. "It belongs to him." Then he walked out. The entire visit had lasted 32 minutes. That evening, I called Maya, one of the few people in Ethan's family I trusted. She answered before the second ring. "You heard about the party?" "What party?" The silence on her end told me everything. Graham had apparently spent the last week organizing what he called a family welcome. More than 30 relatives had been invited to his house for Saturday afternoon. He had rented folding chairs, ordered food from a local barbecue place, and asked the pastor from his church to come say a blessing over Caleb. That would have been strange enough. But Graham had also told everyone Ethan had approved it. Ethan had never heard a word about it. According to Maya, Graham planned to introduce Caleb publicly as the next Graham Carter and announced that the family would use Graham as his middle name whether we liked it or not. Ethan called him immediately. I stood beside him in the kitchen while the phone was on speaker. "Dad, what is this thing Saturday?" "A family gathering. For our baby? For my grandson. You didn't ask us." Graham sounded genuinely confused. "Why would I need permission to welcome him into his own family?" Ethan closed his eyes. "We're not coming." There was a long pause. Then Graham's voice became colder. "If you don't bring him, everyone will know exactly who made that decision." "I made it." "No," Graham said. "You're letting your wife make it for you."
Ethan hung up. We did not attend. Instead, I wrote one message in the family group chat. I kept it short and factual. Graham had planned the event without speaking to us. Ethan had never agreed. We had not authorized anyone to organize a ceremony, announce a different name, or present our son publicly without our involvement. Within minutes, responses started appearing. Some relatives were shocked. One aunt wrote that Graham had personally told her Ethan requested the gathering. A cousin said he had already bought a gift because Graham claimed we were excited about it. Others defended him. Patricia wrote, "He was trying to do something loving and you embarrassed him in front of everyone." Ethan replied before I could, "He embarrassed himself by lying." After that, Graham disappeared. No calls, no texts, no messages through relatives. For 3 full days, nothing. And somehow, the silence made me more nervous than the arguments. Graham was not someone who suddenly accepted losing control. Silence meant he was planning something. On the 4th morning, the doorbell rang at 7:12. I was sitting on the couch feeding Caleb while Ethan was upstairs showering. I checked the camera on my phone. Graham was standing on our porch. Patricia was beside him. Both were dressed like they had come directly from church, even though it was Wednesday morning. Graham was holding a Bible. I did not open the door. Instead, I went upstairs and knocked hard on the bathroom door.
Ethan came out seconds later, towel around his waist, water still dripping from his hair. "My dad?" I nodded. He dressed quickly and went downstairs. When he opened the front door, he stayed directly in the doorway. "You cannot keep showing up without calling." Graham raised the Bible slightly. "I'm not here to argue." Patricia immediately added, "He just wants 5 minutes." Graham said he had canceled the gathering. He claimed he finally understood we did not want a ceremony. "All I want," he said calmly, "is to pray over my grandson once." His voice was softer than usual, careful, prepared. I watched Ethan's shoulders drop slightly. Graham saw it too. That was what he had come for. Guilt. Ethan looked back at me. I shook my head. No. Graham's expression changed immediately. He raised his voice just enough that our neighbors could hear. "There, you see? She won't even let me pray for him." Patricia stared at Ethan like she was waiting for him to prove something. Graham continued, "What kind of person keeps a grandfather from blessing his own grandson?" I stepped forward. "The same person whose medical office you lied to, the same person whose hospital room you tried to enter, and the same person whose baby you refused to hand back when asked." For the first time, Graham had no immediate answer. His face went completely still. Then something unexpected happened. His eyes filled with tears. "I just want to hold him one more time," he whispered, and Ethan took half a step toward him. I saw the guilt hit Ethan before he even moved. Graham was crying now, not quietly. His whole face had collapsed and his hand shook around the Bible. "I held you the day you were born," he told Ethan. "I promised myself I would be there for every generation after you. I know I pushed too hard. I know I made mistakes, but please don't take my family away from me." Patricia covered her mouth like she was watching something heartbreaking. Ethan looked destroyed. He took another small step toward the porch. That was when I said, "Graham, look at me." He did. "If you're sorry, tell me exactly what you're sorry for." His expression shifted. "I just told you, I pushed too hard." "That's not specific." The crying slowed. I continued. "You called my doctor's office and pretended you were helping with our paperwork. Are you sorry for that?" Graham stared at me. Nothing. "You tried to enter my hospital room while I was in active labor. Are you sorry for that?" Still nothing. "You organized an event for our child, lied to 30 people that Ethan approved it, and planned to announce a name we never chose. Are you sorry for that?" His jaw tightened. Patricia looked uncomfortable now. I took one more step forward. "You held Caleb in our living room and did not give him back when I asked. Are you sorry for that?" Whatever emotion had been on Graham's face disappeared. He wiped his cheeks with the back of his hand. "I am his grandfather." That was it. 4 words. Not "I was wrong," not "I'm sorry," just the same title he had been using as permission for everything. I nodded. "Then you're not apologizing. You're asking us to forget what happened." Graham looked past me toward Ethan. "Are you really going to let this happen?" There it was again. Go around me. Make Ethan choose. Turn me into the enemy. Ethan stood silently for several seconds. Then he looked at his father. "Dad, she asked you a simple question." Graham's face hardened. "You too?" "No," Ethan said. "Not me too. You keep acting like everyone is attacking you when people are only asking you to respect basic boundaries." Patricia tried to interrupt. "Ethan, Dad is emotional right now. So was my wife when he was trying to get into her hospital room." Patricia stopped talking. Graham looked older suddenly. Not weaker, just smaller. I could tell he had expected tears to end the conversation. When they didn't, he had nothing prepared. He lowered the Bible.
I guess I know where I stand, I said. You know exactly where you stand. Outside our house until you can take responsibility. His eyes flashed. You're punishing me. No, we're protecting our peace. Ethan stepped back inside. Graham looked at him one final time. You'll regret this. Ethan's hand tightened around the edge of the door. Maybe, but I'll regret letting this continue more. Then he closed the door. I could hear Graham and Patricia outside, their voices low and angry, then footsteps moving down the walkway. When their car finally pulled away, Ethan sat on the stairs and covered his face with both hands. I sat beside him. I don't know how to fix this, he said. You don't fix it for him. That night, after Caleb was asleep, I opened my laptop. I created a document. At the top, I wrote, Timeline of incidents involving Graham Carter. Then I started listing dates. The call to my doctor, the hospital, security, the blanket, the refusal to return Caleb, the fake ceremony, the unannounced visit, everything. I added screenshots from the family messages. I saved the hospital notes. I included photographs of the blanket with the wrong name stitched into it. This was no longer about winning an argument. It was about making sure the truth existed somewhere outside Graham's version of events. 2 days later, Maya called. Graham's mother is coming into town this weekend, she said. I sat up straighter. Eleanor Carter, Ethan's grandmother. The only person I had ever seen Graham listen to without arguing. And suddenly, I knew exactly what we were going to do.
Saturday afternoon, Ethan and I drove to Graham's house with Caleb strapped into his car seat and a printed copy of the timeline inside my bag. I had rewritten it into a letter. No insults, no accusations I could not prove, just dates, actions, witnesses, and consequences. When we walked inside, I immediately understood why Graham had agreed to meet. Eleanor was there. She sat in the armchair beside the fireplace, small and perfectly still, her silver hair pinned back the way she always wore it. Graham occupied the large leather chair across from her. Patricia was on the couch. Maya stood near the dining room doorway, arms folded. The second Graham saw Caleb, he stood and reached toward the carrier. I moved it slightly behind my leg. Sit down, Graham. We came to talk first. His eyes narrowed. For a second, I could almost hear what he wanted to say. Then Eleanor spoke. Sit down, Graham. He looked at his mother. She did not blink. Let her speak. Graham sat. I took the letter from my bag. My goal isn't to embarrass you, I said. My goal is to make sure nobody leaves this room confused about why we are here. Then I started reading. I began with the call to my obstetrician's office. I gave the date. I explained how Graham had misrepresented himself and asked questions about accessing the delivery room. His mouth tightened, but he stayed silent. Then I read the hospital section. His arrival before we had notified him, his argument with the nurses, trying my door while I was in active labor, refusing to leave the maternity floor, security escorting him downstairs. I placed copies of the hospital notes on the coffee table. Patricia stared at them. You actually have reports? Yes. Graham shifted in his chair. I continued. The jacket embroidered with a name we had never chosen. The first visit to our home. Calling Caleb Little G. The blanket marked Graham Carter too. And then the moment he held my son after I asked for him back. That was the first time Eleanor reacted. Her eyes moved sharply toward Graham. You did what? Graham leaned forward. It was 3 seconds. I looked at him. Then you remember it. The room went silent. I kept reading. The family gathering. The rented chairs. The food. The pastor. 30-plus guests. The claim that Ethan had approved everything.
Then the unannounced morning visit and the attempt to use an apology without admitting what he had actually done. When Patricia opened her mouth, Eleanor raised one hand. Not yet. Patricia looked down. I reached the final paragraph and lowered the paper. Graham, you have cried. You have yelled. You have blamed Ethan. You have blamed me. You have sent relatives to pressure us. But you have never apologized for one specific thing you did. His face was turning red. I continued. I am not keeping Caleb away from you. You are doing that yourself. Every time you ignore a boundary, you make it harder for us to trust you. Graham looked at Eleanor, not at me. His mother stared back at him for several seconds. Then she said quietly, She's right. His expression changed. Eleanor continued, I raised you to understand that being family does not mean owning people. Mom, no. One word stopped him. You went to a woman's hospital while she was giving birth, after she told you not to come? Graham looked at the floor. You tried her door? Silence. You held her baby after she told you to give him back? It wasn't like that. Eleanor leaned forward. Then tell me what it was like. Graham opened his mouth. Nothing came out. For the first time since I had known him, nobody rushed in to rescue him from the silence. Patricia stared at her hands. Maya remained against the doorway. Ethan sat beside me. Graham looked around the room as if he were waiting for someone to take his side. Nobody did. His voice came out low. So, everyone has decided I'm the villain. Ethan finally spoke. No, Dad. We've decided you have to stop. Graham stood abruptly.
I gave everything to this family. His voice was rising now. And now I have to ask permission just to see my own grandson? Yes, I said. He turned toward me. I placed another sheet of paper on the table. Starting today, you do.
Graham stared at the second sheet. What is that? Boundaries. He laughed once, but there was no humor in it. You wrote rules for me? Ethan answered before I could. We wrote them together. That stopped Graham. He looked at his son. Together? Ethan nodded. Yes. I slid the paper closer. No unannounced visits. No contacting my doctor, Caleb's pediatrician, daycare, school, or anyone else pretending to speak for us. No discussing our parenting decisions with relatives in order to pressure us. No alternate names for Caleb. No taking him anywhere without permission, and if we ask for him back, you hand him back immediately. Graham's face tightened more with every sentence. If you want to visit, I continued, you ask us first. If we say no, the answer is no. You do not call 6 relatives afterward and send them after Ethan. Patricia looked away. Graham picked up the page. His hands were shaking slightly. This is insane, Eleanor said. No, what you did was insane. He looked at her like she had slapped him. Mom, you don't understand everything that has happened. I understand enough. I was excited. You were told no. I wanted to be part of my grandson's life. You were told no. I made mistakes. Eleanor leaned back. Then say what they were. Graham went quiet again. His eyes moved across the page. Finally, he looked at Ethan. And you agree with all of this? Ethan did not hesitate. I wrote half of it. For a moment, Graham just stared at him. Then he lowered himself slowly back into the chair. Nobody spoke. Caleb made a small sound from the carrier beside me. Graham's eyes moved toward him. His expression softened immediately. I want to see my grandson. I folded my hands in my lap. Then this is how it works now. He looked back at the paper. You expect me to ask permission every time? Yes. I'm family. So are we. He rubbed his forehead. What if I don't agree? Then you don't see Caleb. Patricia finally spoke. That sounds like a threat. It's not, Ethan said. It's a choice. I looked at Graham. You can disagree with every rule on that page, but you cannot disagree and still expect access to our child. Graham sat perfectly still. Then Eleanor said something I did not expect. Apologize. He looked at her. For what? She shook her head slowly. That question is exactly the problem. Graham's face flushed again. I already said I pushed too hard. No, Eleanor said. Choose one thing. His jaw worked. For nearly 30 seconds, nobody moved. Finally, he looked at me. I should not have called your doctor. It was stiff, almost forced.
But it was specific. I said nothing. He continued, and I should not have tried your hospital door. His eyes dropped to the floor. And when you asked for Caleb back, I should have given him back immediately. Ethan exhaled beside me. Graham swallowed. I was angry because I felt like I was losing my place in the family. I said, being afraid does not give you permission to control us. I know. That was the first time he had said it without adding, but. Eleanor watched him closely. Graham looked toward Caleb again. Can I hold him? I glanced at Ethan, then back at Graham. You asked? He waited. Yes, I said. I lifted Caleb carefully from the carrier and walked across the room. Graham held out his arms. I placed my son in them. This time, the moment Caleb settled against his chest, Graham did not call him Little G. He did not mention the Carter name. He did not make a speech. He simply looked down at him. Hi, Caleb, he whispered. Nobody in the room said anything. After several minutes, Caleb started fussing. I stood. Graham looked at me immediately. He wants his mom. Then he handed him back before I even asked. It was a tiny thing, but after everything that had happened, it felt enormous. We stayed another 20 minutes. When we left, Graham did not follow us outside. He did not ask when he could see Caleb again. He simply said, "Thank you for coming." For the first time in months, I believed he understood that being a grandfather was not something he could demand. It was a relationship he had to earn.
The next few weeks were quiet. Not perfect, quiet. Graham did not suddenly become a different person because of one conversation. He still had opinions about everything. He still made comments Ethan had to shut down. He still had moments where I could see the old habit returning, that instinct to treat a family decision like something he could negotiate until he got his way. But now there was a difference. He stopped when we said stop. The first time he asked to visit, he texted both of us. Would Sunday afternoon work for me to see Caleb? No guilt, no surprise arrival, no relatives calling afterward. We told him 3 o'clock. He arrived at 3:02. I noticed. So did Ethan. Graham probably noticed us noticing. He stayed 45 minutes. When Caleb started getting tired, I said it was time to end the visit. Graham stood immediately, no argument. Before leaving, he paused at the door and looked at me. I know you probably don't trust me yet. I appreciated that he said yet instead of acting like one apology had erased everything. I don't, I told him. He nodded. That's fair. Then he left. The embroidered blanket stayed in a storage box in our garage for months. I could not bring myself to throw it away. Not because I wanted Caleb to have it, because it reminded me of how close I had come to letting everyone convince me that my boundaries were somehow cruel. Eventually, Ethan found it while looking for Christmas decorations. He held it up and asked what we should do with it. I looked at the stitched name for a few seconds. Donate it. To someone named Graham Carter II? I laughed for the first time when talking about that blanket. Maybe just donate the fabric. We threw it away instead. Patricia took longer. For months, she insisted I had been too harsh. Then one afternoon, she came over without Graham and admitted something I never expected. She said their father had always been like this, not just with me, with Ethan, with her, with everyone. He decides what he thinks is best, she said, and then the whole family learns to make it easier to give him what he wants. That sentence stayed with me, because that was exactly what had happened. Graham had spent decades teaching everyone that saying no to him created more problems than saying yes. People called that keeping the peace, but it was not peace, it was surrender. The real change did not happen when I stood up to Graham. It happened when Ethan stopped translating his father's behavior into excuses. Months later, Caleb was lying on the living room rug during another visit when Graham asked if he could pick him up. I said yes. He sat on the couch, bounced him gently, and smiled when Caleb grabbed his finger. Then Graham looked at me.
I keep thinking about the hospital. I felt my body tense automatically. He noticed. I'm not trying to start anything. I waited. He looked down at Caleb. I really believed being his grandfather meant I had a right to be there. He paused. I was wrong. It was the sentence I had wanted months earlier. No explanation, no speech about family traditions, just the truth. I nodded. Thank you for saying that. He never became the grandfather from some perfect family movie. That was not what I expected anymore. But he became someone who asked before showing up. Someone who handed Caleb back the first time I reached for him. Someone who learned that love did not mean access without permission. And Ethan changed too. The next time a relative tried to tell me that I was controlling the family, he did not look at me first. He said, "These are our decisions." Our. That word mattered. Caleb is almost 2 now. He knows Graham as Grandpa, not Grandpa G, not Big Graham, not anything connected to a name Graham once decided our son should have. Just Grandpa. Sometimes I think about that morning in the hospital, Graham standing outside my door convinced that being family gave him the right to cross any boundary he wanted. It did not. Family is not ownership. Love is not permission. And being a grandparent does not give someone automatic authority over a child. Graham wanted a place in Caleb's life. In the end, he got one. But only after he learned the lesson he had spent months refusing to understand. A place in someone's life is not something you take. It is something they allow you to have.